I want to say two things that led me to the wanting to put this book together, put this volume together. One is that, as you know, I was here in New York, where I'm from, with my wife and daughter on September 11th, 2001. And the three of us were actually on a street corner and watched the second plane hit the South Tower, and we watched as both buildings collapsed into the, impossibly dense financial district streets there. And it was, as for so many New Yorkers, of course, an indescribable moment. Nothing could possibly explain what happened then. And as New Yorkers know, and people around the country and around the world know, there was a certain form of solidarity that grew out of those horrific events and those horrific attacks. What troubled me, though, came in the weeks following and the months following, and I wasn't the only one that was troubled by it. And that was a sort of blackout of attention on some of the expressions of thought following 9/11. For example, there were weekly gatherings at Union Square. Now, everyone on television all over the world saw the candlelight vigils and the pictures of loved ones missing. But what people didn't get to see was weekly gatherings that were expressing the idea that patriotism can involve thoughtful reflection on what to do next, and not headlong rush into military action before thinking about what to do. And I participated in many marches around Union Square, up 6th Avenue, Avenue of the Americas, that were not at all covered on television or in newspapers until much, much later. Now we see those, but at the time there really wasn't anything there. And so my point is that there was an overwhelming feeling that was similar to John Ashcroft's admonition that anyone who criticizes the government is giving ammunition to the enemy, right? Or Ari Fleischer said it, that Americans need to watch what they say. And part of the reasons for putting this book together was a worry that what was happening in our nation's schools in the 5-6 years since 9/11 is that students were getting that same message, that Americans need to watch what they say, that, that part of a patriotic commitments to this country did not have to do with a thoughtful critique about where we need to go and what directions we need to pursue to make this country better. In the book, we talk about two kinds of patriotism. One is a blind patriotism or nationalism, authoritarian patriotism. Those are the words that describe it, and it's the kind of patriotism that goes by the slogan, something like what G.K. Chesterton said is, "My country, right or wrong," is like saying "my mother, drunk or sober," right? It means that there is no room for critique or room for improvement, that you just have to do head-nodding agreement with what the government leaders say. But there's another kind of patriotism, a democratic kind of patriotism, that involves love of the ideals that made America strong. And love of those ideals sometimes means looking for new directions and looking for other ways to make our society better and to improve the lives of everyone in our society. And that really is what led to the putting together of the book, and it's also what led me to select a certain kind of essay for the book, ones that would make people think, not that would just simply echo the thunderous feelings at that time that there was America, right or wrong.
Joe, the America, right or wrong, that notion, what's happened to it in the years since 9/11?
Yeah, I mean, recently we're seeing sort of a lot more open critique about the directions that we've taken in Iraq and other
Your book too.
Foreign policy issues, and this book too, exactly. At the time, though, there was much less of that. But let me say something about America, right or wrong, because you and I can think of that phrase, America, right or wrong, and the fact is, I agree with America, right or wrong, and in some ways you might say, my mother, drunk or sober, sure, whether she's drunk or sober, she's still my mother, right? Or people love their families, they love and they stand by them. But of course, with your mother, if she were drunk, you would try and get her into rehab. You would try and improve the situation. You would try and make sure that things were going to get better. And with America, it's the same thing. We can say America, right or wrong, it's my country and I love it. at the same time that we say it's important to think about what are the ideals that made America what it is today. And unfortunately, in the intervening years, now it's starting to get better, just starting. But there is a lot of legislation passed and a lot of experiences that students and teachers have gone through that we would expect to find more in some kind of totalitarian regime than in America.
Well, the reason I ask the question, because I wondered whether in the years since 2001, whether there had been a slackening off of those ideas, or whether indeed we were continuing to go down that road. If you say there has been some improvement, it makes me feel one hell of a lot better, but also surprised, because I had the feeling that the continuing drumbeat that has gone on since 9/11 was going to lead to state legislation, local legislation that wouldn't ease off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I could be more optimistic and disabuse you of what you're saying, but unfortunately I agree in a lot of ways. I mean, what has changed is, look, a majority of the country right now is against the military intervention in Iraq. There are huge fractures in the population of the United States and, of course, globally in Americans' military action abroad as a result of 9/11, and whether it's been beneficial or hurtful to the causes that made America strong. So that's what I mean by some loosening up. On the other hand, from the policy perspective, you're exactly right. And from schools, it's even worse than in the nation in general.
What is happening in the schools?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Here's just a couple of anecdotal stories, and then I'll also talk about a few policies. First of all, there were many, many cases, dozens if not hundreds of cases, where students and teachers were penalized for expressing the wrong opinions about current events. So, for example, Timothy Geese was a student in Detroit, Michigan, who came to school wearing a sweatshirt that had a quote by the well-known American radical Albert Einstein, and it was an anti-war quote. And his principal came up to Timothy and said, "Timothy, you have to take that sweatshirt off. It's going to disrupt school activities." Now, this is a school where students were coming to school wearing American flags and support our troops messages and all kinds of other political messages, supporting the current president, for example, et cetera, et cetera. But Timothy had to take that sweatshirt off, and he refused. And when he refused, the principal suspended him. The ACLU for 3 days. The ACLU eventually took up Timothy's case and won, but you can imagine the chill factor that spreads across the student body when things like that happened. Another example is Katie Sierra in West Virginia, who came to school again wearing a T-shirt that said her own rewritten version of the pledge on it. It said, "I pledge the grievance to the flag," and it ended with something like, "and liberty and justice for some, not all." Now, many teachers and educators of all kinds, including the media, would see this as a perfect teachable moment, right? Let's talk about the different aspects of the war and what you think about it and what you think about government, et cetera, et cetera. But Forrest Mann, the principal at Katie's school in West Virginia, told Katie that she needed to take this T-shirt off, and she also said that it was her right to wear that T-shirt. And there were 3 of Katie's classmates who told a newspaper reporter, that they were going to give Katie a taste of West Virginia justice because she was wearing this shirt. The principal knew this, didn't suspend those students, but suspended attend she was forbidden to go to attend her prom or go through graduation.
What happened?
Did
the ACLU get into that?
Yes, they took her case up as well, and again eventually won. So, I mean, because all of these cases are blatantly unconstitutional, but the damage is already done by the time they win.
Yeah, but let me just stop you and ask, has the ACLU and its principals been able to prevail?